Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring. Hey everybody, welcome back to There Is No Business Like. I'm here with my friends, Katie.
Hello, Katie Miller with the Midland Center for the Arts in Midland, Michigan.
Hey, Brian.
Hello, Brian Zelmer from KU Presents in Kutztown, Pennsylvania.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Ellie. Kevin Maynard, Quad City Arts, splitting the border between Iowa and Illinois.
What's up, Josh?
What's up? Josh Benson rocking it from Marion, Illinois at the Marion Cultural and Civic Center.
All right, well, we're going to keep the rockin' vibes going here today. Katie and I sat down at the APAP conference with one of our dear Theater for Young Audience colleagues, Sarah Saltwick. As the listeners know, we start with a little question of the day that you can chime in and answer on social media later if you want. At one point early on in this interview, Sarah mentions a point in her life that was just like fun and carefree, and she didn't have any understanding of what her friends did for work, but they were just young and starting out and figuring their stuff out. So I wanted to ask you all if you just took like a little hop in the time machine. What part of your life would you like to return to for its carefree vibes?
Looking back on it, I can look back to it to say, oh, that was a much more carefree time. But in the moment, I never viewed it that way, is the problem. Like in the moment, it was always, well, I've got these things in front of me and I'm going to focus on this. But I was never that like carefree in the moment. And I wish I would have been, especially in those times when I didn't have nearly as much going on and it was a much easier time. And for me, I just go back and slap myself and be like, hey, enjoy this.
I would go back to when I was in community college and heavily involved in the drama club and theater classes and everything. We had a 24-hour diner just down the hill from the college that we would literally spend all night together, having fun, doing skits. Like, I'm sure the diner staff hated us, but over time they found us endearing, I think, especially Betty, rest in peace. She was such a sweet woman. So I would definitely go back to those days. That was so much fun, just hanging out in the diner all night long with.
I think I would go back to when I lived in Traverse City. So I had a really intensive job working at Interlochen, but I had a really amazing group of friends. And Traverse City is a really great space for young professionals because the food scene is amazing. The beer and wine scene is amazing. There's so much to do. So when I wasn't working, I was spending time with this really great group of friends that I made. And we would go out and go on adventures and go out and eat and drink and just have a really good time. And some of those friendships have lasted past my time in TC, which I'm really grateful for. And I got to do a lot of community theater and teach and that sort of thing too. So it really was a wonderful time for me. And I really treasure and cherish that time. And it was before kiddos. And so, it was definitely a more relaxed and carefree time, even though I was like working a ton, still was able to find time for fun as well.
Yeah, Danielle, I think I would probably go back to working like when I first started working at the Orpheum Theater, because I think it just seemed, looking back, it seems like a much like simpler time. Like there was like less going on in my own life. There was less going on in my work life. And I was able to had a really great group of friends. I was able to hang out with them. It seems looking back, it was easier. But I think like Josh said, I didn't take that moment to really realize and take a moment to appreciate everything that was happening in that moment. So if I could go back, I think like Josh, I would tell myself like, enjoy these moments. And I think that in 5-10 years, I will do the exact same thing and look back at this moment right now and go, man, I should have really appreciated these things a bit more. So thanks for helping me think about that.
There is something that's like overall fun. And then like, I don't know, a little bit makes you think about like putting like the rose colored glasses on in the past. And I had forgotten about the diner times in college. And now I'm contemplating also taking Brian's answer. But there was like a moment after, it kind of feels like a moment now, like after we were married and like bought our house and I had my job at the Alden and like, we were just like finding hobbies and, like planting a garden and like just really feeling like coming into ourselves and like the future was possible and we were like ready for kind of whatever came. And even though I know like at the time I would have never been like, oh gosh, this is the moment. But like there is something about like if I could revisit that part of my life again, like I wouldn't mind taking like a little vacation there to just like enjoy the moments more. And I'm also terrified in 10 years, I'll say like this exact moment as well. And I know I will. Katie and I sat down at APAP with our dear friend Sarah Saltwick of Holden and Arts Associates, which is a theater for young audiences agent based in Austin, Texas. And I'd say I hope you enjoy our conversation, but I know you will.
My name is Sarah Saltwick. I'm one of the co-directors at Holden and Arts Associates. My official title is co-director and then of sales and also artistic relations, which was a title I gave myself because I work with a lot of potential artists of talking to people who are interested in learning more about our agency. And I thought that should be my title.
Good for you. So Sarah, thank you so much for sitting down and chatting with us today. Katie and I, as always, are excited to talk to another amazing woman working in the TYA space. So I would love it if you could just get started telling us a little bit about your origin story.
So I was working in a coffee bar at Central Market, which is like an upscale grocery store in Austin, Texas. It's not quite Whole Foods, but it's similar. And I had gone to school for theater in undergrad. I did a lot of theater. And one of my good friends, Stacy, said one day when she was having a party in her backyard, she was like, "Oh yeah, you do theater. You should apply for this job at my agency." And part of that time in Austin, like I had a lot of friends and I had no idea what they did. Like it was a nice time of life where we just sort of like hung out in backyards and saw bands and, you know, had fun. I did want to apply for a job at her agency, and I met Michael and Teresa, who are the founders of the company. I did an interview. I talked about, you know, my theater experience, and they hired me in August, or I think my interview was in July. And then pretty soon, like I want to say within the first month, I went to the Western Arts Alliance, and that was really like the jumping in point. So I went to a first conference really early on, and I started as a salesperson in the West. I was there for a couple of years and worked with Stacy. Stacy was a salesperson in the East. And then I went to grad school. So I stepped away from my job, but I was still sort of working summers. I was still like very much around and aware of what the agency was doing. And like, I was very focused in grad school, but I was also like, oh, how are our artists? How are the tours? Whenever I saw Stacey, I was like, how's this person? Did you call this person? She was like, this is my job. Like, you don't work there. And then after I had a fellowship in Minneapolis that was for playwriting, and that was going to cover some of my living costs, but I wanted to do more work. And so I started working part-time remotely again, this time in the East. When that fellowship wrapped up, I moved back to Austin and started full-time. And then about 7 years ago, we began a long transition process of Michael and Teresa retiring in spring, Stacy and I taking ownership of the business. And so for the last 5 years, we've been the owners of the business.
Before we go any further, can you tell us a little bit more about the agency and what you all do in the space that you operate in? And then we're going to dig a little bit more into your story.
So Holden and Arts is 40 years this year, which I'm 41, almost 41. So we're like the same age. And the agency's represented lots of different artists over the years. But I would say in the last 15 years or so, we've really been focused on work for young audiences. We have artists from the US as well as international artists. So we work closely with venues to bring artists in either for their school series where they're bringing in kids to the theater to see work, or for their family series, you know, which is for the whole family. Sometimes we'll bring an artist into a school in more of a residency program. So we're looking to curate a roster and then also to work with the venue to understand what their needs are, and then move that all the way through the interest phase with our venues through the contracting. And then our artists are responsible for the sort of producing and management of the tours, although we're certainly in contact with them when they're on the road.
So you said there was a long transition in the change of ownership of the company. What is it like to buy a business of that? I mean, of that scale and
stature in the industry.
And at a relatively young age.
Yeah. So the first question was, are we going to do this? And so Michael and Teresa met with each of us separately to sort of talk about our interest in this idea. I think all three of us had some variation of like, well, what do the other ones say? I don't think any of us wanted to do it alone, but we thought if this is the team, like Yeah, because we love our jobs. We love our artists. We love our venues. We love the work. It was really understanding, is this team going to move forward? And then working with Michael and Teresa and an outside consultant and some lawyers to sort of, one, figure out how you determine the value of a business. Because if you're buying something, there needs to be payment. And we certainly didn't have enough cash reserves among the three of us to sort of buy it outright. Mm-hmm. So we structured a deal that would basically sort of a sweat equity that would allow us to pay them from the profits of the business over a period of about 3 years. But even determining what that number was tricky because we looked at the profits over a given time, but profits come up and down for the business. We came to a number that we felt like was a fair representation of what it was. And also as an agency, like we have some Mac laptops, but we don't have a lot of assets.
Yeah.
So our biggest assets are our relationships.
And your reputation.
And that's very hard to put a dollar number on. So it was sort of looking at the history of it and sort of saying, if things continue, we think we'll see these kinds of profits. Now we did manage to pay off the business and have about a year before COVID, before like that idea of what the profits we were usually seeing totally changed. And I would say, I'm not going to knock on wood because of the audio of it all, but we're like on track in 23, 24 this season. And I don't know what next year is going to look like but to be back in a place of making a healthy profit. And we as a business have cash reserves. And Stacy in our office isn't a salesperson, but she is our CFO. Like she knows where all the money is. And she's done just an amazing job of like keeping us on track. And I think Spring and I often in the middle of the night or sort of in the middle of our staff meeting, just have this fear of like, oh, we're about to go out of business. And Stacey's like, no, we have, oh my God, here, look at all the money. Look, right. There's money here. And if these things happen, this will be this money. But having COVID as we had been with the business for a long time, but with COVID coming in, it has changed our ability to estimate profit.
So I have two questions, but let's talk a little bit more about the model, the business model first. So your partners are Stacy Meshbane and Spring Carlo, right, in the business. So how do you structure the leadership of the organization? And then in terms of that cash flow and business model, can you talk a little bit more about how you operate the agency from the business perspective? So money in, money out, what sort of decision-making processes are you going through, that sort of thing?
The three of us are equal owners of the business. We have equal decision-making power. We operate by consensus. We're also the staff of the business. There's no one else. We are constantly living with the decisions that our past selves made in order to hopefully help our future selves and present selves. There's no hierarchy, but then there's also sort of no one else right to do any of the work. We now also all work from home. So we had an office for sort of early in our time. And then with COVID, we moved out of our office. And so now we work remotely. We have weekly meetings on Wednesday where we do all the operations. And so a lot of that is updating on dates for the future tour. So right now our big focus is on fall of 24, winter, spring of 25. So we're usually thinking about a year and ahead. So we'll do that, but then we'll also strategize about problems that might have come up with this year. So it's pretty constant communication. For my sales, I'm really focused regionally with the East as well as Canada. And so I work pretty independently there. We identify times that I'm going to target, and I try to fill those times based on the artist's needs. And then when it comes to like roster curation and artist selections and helping our artists pick projects, that's something that all three of us get on board with the projects we have. And now there might be one project that I'm especially excited about, or Project Spring's especially excited about. And as salespeople, I think that's really important. And it'll be kind of reflected in the routing sometimes. And sometimes it's not. It's sometimes things hit in regions differently. For something to be on the roster, it has to have the support from all three of us. And not only just the content, but that the goals of the production feel like something that we can match. So there'll definitely be beautiful shows we love, but when we do the budget work with that company, Stacy will say that's too much money. Like, we're not going to make that
Right.
money. Like, we're not going to be successful with this. And I'll say like, well, but maybe. And then we usually won't do it.
Right. Pre-pandemic to post-pandemic, has the economic reality of what you can put on the road changed significantly?
So I would say the fees venues are paying are pretty similar to what we were seeing pre-pandemic. However, the touring costs are significantly higher. So our artist bottom line is getting tighter, and the margins is tough. And also a lot of companies have higher costs at home, so they're less able to lose money on a tour or to look at a tour as an investment or mission driven. They really need the tour to cover its costs and ideally bring a little bit of money home, which I think is a great goal. So that's where that disconnect is. It's really that rising touring cost and that fees aren't quite keeping up with inflation. And I get it. Like, the venues aren't seeing more income. Family shows are struggling. I think something we'll see is family shows feeling like bigger events where venues feel like they can charge a higher ticket price. And then school shows really being a separate thing. Venues are happier to make that mission driven work.
So, Sarah, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. You did a playwriting fellowship and I believe a master's in writing and playwriting. So where does that fit in with the work that you're doing?
It is the enemy of the work I'm doing. So somebody earlier today also said like, oh, how do you juggle your playwriting work with your work as an agent? And I think, I don't. Like, it feels pretty, the tension is really strong. Not because I think, I want to be a rich and famous playwright. Like, one, I don't think that's very realistic. And also, like, I truly love my job and I feel so grateful. If I think about not doing it, or think about someone else doing it, I really don't like that. I think like, no, this is my job. This is my work. Like, I'm building something here. But I've been writing plays for a long time. And I do feel these ideas for plays sort of jump on me. On my phone, in my notes apps, is the ideas and images for so many plays that I haven't written. So 5 years ago, in a little bit, I had my daughter, who I adore. Being a mom is like the greatest creative act of my life so far, by far. And I haven't successfully written a big new project since she's been born. I've done a lot of revision on work that I've done, wrote before her, but getting that new idea out is something I've really struggled with because I need some real open space that between working and parenting is not available. And honestly, I'm not sure when that will become available. And it can make me feel sad and also really like trapped under a jar. And I don't know what to do about that. So that is like an active question. Cause I think like, maybe I'll take like a week off or this, or I'll take this off. And then in my head, I'm already like, or maybe like a day or maybe an afternoon. Right. I really thought I was going to write a whole screenplay over winter break. I didn't. And I was pretty frustrated. I did write like 40 pages, which is like a lot more than zero.
That's amazing.
That's 40 more pages than I wrote.
Yeah, but it's also not done. And also like a first draft it's not done.
Sure.
I get to see a lot of work and I get to travel and talk to artists. And there's definitely moments where I feel really jealous of some of our artists whose focus is making work. And I know how lucky I am to be in my job where I have so much agency and power. And I also know that making work is not a big part of an artist's day.
I also just want to mention, since I think that you're being a little bit humble, that the first children's show that you wrote was just produced this year and is going to the Kennedy Center in just a few weeks. Even though maybe you're feeling like it's still not rolling out, that's an incredible achievement.
What's been funny in the last 4 years is I've actually had more productions of my work than ever. So I feel in this one way that my playwriting is going better than ever. And because more people are seeing my work, I'm not writing as much as I used to. So, and being in productions, being in rehearsal also makes it hard to write. So yes, I wrote a play called The Girl Who Became Legend. It was a project a long time in the making. It is a feminist folktale with live music. It's very texted. It's very scrappy. It's about a young girl living in a town called Dustbin, where there has been rain ever since she was born. And one day she sees a cloud and no one believes her. And she goes on a journey to catch the cloud to bring it back home. Lots of other stuff happens, but that's the main thrust of it. And it's been a huge joy to work on the show. And the Kennedy Center was a co-commissioner of it with the Zach Scott Theater. And the Kennedy Center especially really helped make this project happen. And I don't know what the future life is for it, but I'm really excited to see what might be possible.
So something I think that's so interesting about the people that we work with in this industry, and especially hearing from you, is how multifaceted everyone is. Just the passions sort of lie everywhere. You're the agent that I've always worked with Holden and Arts Associates. And the thing that has always really drawn me to you all is the real high quality of the work, but also the tools and the resources that you give me, especially in the copy and the images. And we talk a lot on this podcast about transferable skills that we get from either the work that we're doing in administration or the creative work that we're doing, and just how it, like, in some ways there's no difference in how we work. Do you find that, like, that writing and that playwriting backgrounds, like, really helps you all in what you're able to provide for presenters and ultimately, like, prep families for the experience that they're coming to see?
Oh yeah. It's been a lot of time working on the copy, working on different pitches we might do. We do a whole study hall with the three of us where we practice talking about the shows to find those points that we want to emphasize, and ideally a couple of different ones so we can throw out different connection points to see how that hits different people. Spring's background is in development. So she's also, and she also has a playwriting degree. She's also does a lot of front of house. Stacy's whole background is in music and has also done used to tour in a very cool band. I think all three of us are bringing our full selves to the work, trying to really engage with the art that our artists are making. But totally, the writing skills are huge and have been really helpful. If you spend time in production and rehearsal, you're also learning about, like, listening to people and collaborating and starting at the beginning and creating something and seeing it through and working in those kind of rhythms. And that all felt very familiar. There were certain things about this world that felt really alien, like definitely just the whole, like, trade show of it all at my first conference of just like, Michael and Teresa would talk about, like, oh, and we'll be in the booth and we'll talk to people and they'll come up, but you really are just in a little box, and people really do just come up and talk to you in your little box, and you're not supposed to leave. And it's kind of strange. And then everyone just has posters of their artists. And I was like, wait, is this really just how people, they just walk around in the little boxes and see a picture they like and they come talk to you? And yeah, that's how it works. It's more complicated. There's a lot more emails, but the communication side of it and the helping translate what an artist is doing, that definitely is playwriting skills.
In working with you and seeing all of those things that you're able to provide for artists, it's, like, so obvious that you guys are all artists as well, and that you, like, understand the creativity. And it's so fascinating to me, like, how it comes out in the work. Creative people just are creative, like, whether it is that they're doing something that, like, is identified as art, like playwriting or making theater, or in helping other artists kind of tour around the country. So I want to take a little jump, kind of as you were talking about trade shows. We happen to be at one right now. We are at the APAP conference, and you were just a co-chair of the APAP conference, which is a huge role. It's a almost year-round responsibility. I've also seen you participating in other larger industry-wide leadership and support things. So I'd love if you could talk about, like, why that's important to you, why you were doing all this, and still, giving back to the industry in those ways.
It's nice to hear you say that, because I don't know if I think of myself as, like, a leader in that way, because I think some of what I'm doing is stepping into roles or into opportunities that have been there that I want to continue, that I see the value in. We participated in a showcase Sunday morning at this conference with three other agencies. And it was something that sort of came together about a month ago, and it seemed like a good opportunity, but it was just one of those things where it was like, oh, someone needs to help organize this. And I had already sort of sent 2 emails about it, and I was like, oh, it's me. Like, I am that person unless I make it someone else. And I was like, okay, I can be this person. I think it's good. And then I had the night before our showcase, just like a lot of nightmares about where the door was, and that suddenly the door in the performance space would be like on the stage, even though this is a well-established performance. That's a bad place for a door. Like, don't. And I was really trying to tell my nighttime brain, like, 1, I don't think the door's on the stage for the audience. Like, I don't think they're going to walk into the performance space. 2, like, that's not your problem. And 3, like, it's nighttime, go to bed. Like, you can't. So leadership things definitely come with an amount of stress, often about like doors or chairs or things, but it makes me so happy when events go well that I think like, okay, I can do it again. Mm-hmm. And I'm also just very curious about what's going to happen. With Youth and Family Forum, which is a gathering that's traditionally happened on Friday morning. It's something I've participated in a lot and something I really believe in as a place for conversation and learning. And I have strong ideas about what is important in that space and sort of building off things I've seen before. And the gathering this year went really well. And I felt so happy that I was able to help create this container for all these conversations. And this year too, I was so aware of all the conversations that I wasn't personally part of, but had helped create this space for. That is positive, because the work I do, it can't just be about the literal work I'm doing at my desk. It has to have a larger life.
And you just, named 2 or 3 things that I benefited from. And I benefited from connections made in that room. And, we're just all so interconnected. Having sort of those industry-wide roles, even if they're short term, it's just, I think it's like, it's hard to kind of like take on. It's nice to know that doing those things and kind of getting to the other side is in some ways like self-fulfilling. And it should be. About being APAP chair, one of the co-chairs, that was a really great opportunity because I had a chance to learn from some people who I hadn't seen in that capacity. So both from our committee members and then my 4 other co-chairs, it was some folks I knew, but I hadn't worked with them. And I've worked with Spring and Stacy for 10 years now. Like, that's how long we've been a team. So I really understand how the 3 of us work, but to get a little bit of insight into how other people work, other organizations, the other questions that people are thinking of was really nice, because it can be isolating. We spend as agents, a lot of time in our own agency with our needs and values. So to open it up to the wider conversation was great.
And you do, Danielle, and I know this firsthand, you do spend time serving the field in these ways. So what would you say to maybe a younger person coming into the industry or been in for a few years that is thinking like, oh, I want to do more, I want to step up, I want to serve, or is just looking for more of a way to connect? Like, what advice would you give them?
If you say out loud in enough rooms, I'd like to be part of this, the opportunities will find you so just to keep saying out loud of the things you want to work on. I would think about things that you want to learn about that you don't know, but that you think might be useful. And that might be useful today, or it might be useful in 5 years. So I certainly learned a lot about contracting, working closely with Teresa. In some of our conversations that I pay, which was the International Performing Arts for Youth, where there's a lot of international work, in conversations with some of those artists, I learned a lot more about touring and creating work in different countries. And that's something I was super interested in too. And it wasn't as directly relevant until a couple of years later, and we would start to work with different countries. So I think thinking broadly about sort of skills and interests and curiosities, things you're comfortable doing, and then like maybe like what's that one step away, especially if you can, as you find friendly groups. I will say like Youth and Family is a pretty friendly space and everyone wants each other to succeed. So like it's been a really nice place to grow as a leader because it feels just naturally supportive. As a young person in the field, getting a sense of those spaces that feel good and then thinking, oh, how can I make this better? So my daughter is in Montessori school. And one of, I think it's Maria Montessori, but an idea in that community is how can we make our classroom more beautiful? How can we make this place more beautiful? And it's very sweet and kind to me because it's not better. It's actually, how can we make it more beautiful? You don't have to be the best, but you're going to bring in something that's going to add to the experience of whether it's that meeting, whether it's a new festival or initiative. Like, I'm not saying this out loud in a like, give me this job universe, but I have been thinking a lot more about the roles our venues have of like welcoming families and of different programming choices. And I went to the Pittsburgh Festival last year with my daughter and we had such a good time, and we had a good time at the performance, but there was so much interconnected, was it crafts outside or different people greeting us or different stands, things that they did to really make that experience. And part of me was like, oh, I want to design some experiences. I want to think about it from that perspective of that time from when a family arrives at a space, you know, and before and after the show and what that looks like.
So over the years, I have benefited drastically from you and Spring and Stacy's curation of your roster. It's allowed me to be a wonderful curator of my space. And I'd love to know what you all look at whenever you're considering bringing an artist or a production onto your roster and what that looks like for your agency. Like, it's got to be so hard to make those choices. There's so many great, wonderful pieces of work out there.
I'm so glad you've done so many of our artists, and they're great. And I love them. We do get approached by artists. We do also travel to see work. And we're always looking for a couple of things. We're looking for a work that really moves us and really surprises us and really speaks to us. And sometimes that might be about the sheer beauty of the images or how something's created. Often it's narrative. Spring and I particularly are pretty narrative-driven people. And I would say we've also looked for work that challenges that is more, a little more of the spectacle, a little more of the visuals. And maybe there is a narrative, but the company is interested in other things. Story is big, character, the skill of it all, the experience, what that experience is. I don't always like talking about quality because I think that assumes a hierarchy, but I'm trying to pay attention to my experience as a person. And then I really like to see work with the audience it's intended for. So to see it with a school group, to see it with a family, and really listen and feel and watch as they engage. Use that along with my experience to sort of see how is this piece effective at what it's trying to do. So that's a big one. And if a piece doesn't speak to us in one of those ways, if it's not really making us think, really making us laugh, really making us feel, it's not going to go on the roster. Like we can't spend 9 months trying to sell it and then another year with it on the road if we don't deeply feel for it. So that's the big first step. And that is hard when you're watching a video that's not great. So there's definitely been work where we thought, this could be great. This could be brilliant, but the video's not great. Sometimes there's not an audience, or sometimes just the quality or the sound isn't quite there. So we think, and we'll tell the artist, if we have a chance to see this live, please invite us and we'll see. And then it's really working closely with an artist about what the needs are, and then us thinking about what we might be successful in the marketplace. So a lot of things just feel too expensive, and they think, and we think we won't be successful with this. And the artist might be successful on their own, booking 1 or 2 dates for a longer run. But for us to be successful, we need to work with a wide range of venues. As we book a lot of routed tours, which means our artists might be on the road for 8 weeks to 14 weeks. They're going to lots of different communities. And then we have to think about, are we competing with ourselves? Do we have too many shows about the same thing, or even for the same age range or the same style? And that gets really tough, of having to make some choices about what we want. And particularly with our returning artists who we have long-term relationships with, sometimes they've got a couple possible projects, and then sometimes they say, look, this is the show I really want to tour. And then we have to sort of work on the budget and think about what's possible and try our best.
So as somebody that works really directly with artists on a day-to-day basis, what do you think are maybe like one or two things as a field we could do better, more beautifully in the future to help like support our artists or take care of them better so that they're able to give us more work?
I mean, more money is great. I think as people are able to pay higher fees and particularly keep artists longer in their community, if that means residency activities one day and a show another day. It doesn't have to be a show, but to think about spending longer with an artist and compensating them for that whole time, that is huge.
So Sarah, you mentioned you have a daughter, so you're obviously a working parent, you're a playwright, you're an agent, you're a business owner, and you're also just a person out in the world. So how, Danielle and I talk about this a lot.
It's genuinely like, how can you even possibly do all those things, right? Like,
How can you possibly do all of these things?
three people that understand that so deeply.
Yeah.
Yes. What has your experience been as being a woman in this industry and then being a working parent? We're really interested in what those experiences have, like that lived experience has been like, because it's not always easy being a woman in this field and being a working parent in this field. So what's that been like for you?
I feel really lucky that I work with two other awesome women and that we really have each other's backs. It's interesting now being almost 41 and being in the industry for a while. I used to feel very young and aware of being a young woman and not in like a creepy way, but just like, I didn't deal with any creeps, but people just not taking me seriously. And Michael and Teresa were very well established in the industry. And so people would always defer to them, even after being in the industry for some time. And when I was really, really the responsible one, and there was a bit of a dance there. And now I no longer feel young. I'm not exactly old, but I'm not the youngest person in any of the rooms that I'm in, which is exciting too, to see new people come into the field and to see lots of different folks. And I do feel like it's getting more diverse, both in the new people coming in and the leaders I see around me. So that all feels really encouraging. And then in terms of parenting and working and living, I wasn't expecting to, this is going to sound so silly, but to be paying for school and also for their to be so much not school, to have so many school holidays. That's really caught me by surprise.
The school system does not actually work well for working parents.
No.
It really doesn't. Like,
I think especially in America, there's this idea of like Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, like here we go to work. And then school is not like that. And it comes, I just looked at my calendar. I was like, wait, a February break? Okay. Oh. And my husband is a composer. And so he, for a band called Activist Project, is also a musician. And they've done a film score of a piece that's going to be in the Berlin Film Festival. And so he'll be in Berlin, which I was like, okay, so that means for me, I'm doing drop off and pickup, because usually he does drop off and pickup for our daughter. And I really took a minute where it's just like, oh, my daughter's gonna be home for this Friday and Monday. Like how, and this is it's always a busy time, but this is a busy time for us. Yeah. And then actually the next week I'm going to go work on a play in New York. And so I was thinking, I really need to be working those days. So now I've really got to brainstorm on like what we're going to do. So the literal time management feels quite challenging. I will say I'm a very focused worker now. I mean, I don't think I was ever like really goofing off that much at work, but like, especially when I'm working those like 8:30 to 2:45, like pickup days, like I get a lot done. Mm-hmm. And I work at night, and I'll work a little bit on the weekends, but like I definitely will work at night if I'm doing pickup and drop off. And it's a funny thing because, I'm my boss. No one's telling me I need to do that, but I know the amount of work there is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with that amount of mental load of balancing the scheduling, especially the school schedule, I feel you so hard. Our kids are about the same age. And I remember IPA 2020 seeing you with your daughter at some of the showcases, and she's adorable and so darling. But the balancing the mental load of the school schedule and the snacks and the pickup and drop offs and the husband's schedule and your work schedule, like how do you find time for you in that if you can at all, so that you can go from day to day to day.
I will say my husband is a great partner and we really try to support each other. I think the fact that we were both creative people and deeply involved parents is huge. I think it would be really bad news if some of those things weren't true. Because he and I really get the need to give each other space and both. And he takes my creative work very seriously and I take his creative work very seriously. And like when I was at iPay with my daughter, he was also there. And, you know, he came to some meetings and he would take her away when he needed to, when she was a little bit bigger. She went to 2 iPays, one when she was 6 weeks old. It was too soon for me to go back to work, but I did do that. And we had a great time, but I was very tired. Then she was older and then she was like, you know, a year and 7 weeks old. Then she could really like enjoy the shows a little more. I will say me and my daughter have a lot of fun together and she is so great. But like she really likes art. Like we were doing a lot of like watercolor painting in December over our break. And if she wasn't there, there's no way I would be like painting with watercolors. I'm not I've gotten better because we've done a lot of time in it. And like, I'm much better at like drawing little animals because it's something she likes to do and like reading picture books or like going to the library, going to art museums. So I try to find things, especially with her, that I think we're both really going to enjoy. Mm-hmm. We both love going to a coffee shop and getting a treat and then going for a walk. So like, I do try to live as much of my life like with her and with my husband, like so that it feels like, oh yeah, we're doing this together. And she wanted to come to a lot of rehearsals for The Girl Who Became Legend. And I did not want her to do that. She really wanted to come to APAP as well. And I was like, no, but she came to a couple rehearsals and she took it so seriously, but she was also like, I felt like she was like pretty impressed and she was really interested. She did a beautiful drawing of the lead actor. And she was also really interested in the director, who's also a woman. She's also pretty interested in what women are doing.
That's awesome.
It was distracting a little bit for me to have her there, but it was also good because I felt like we're together.
Well, you're together, but also she gets to see you in your element, right? And being the most Sarah that you can possibly be, right? Being an artist, being a kick-ass woman. I think that's an amazing example to set for your daughter, particularly in this day and age. And as a working parent, that's a reality that like sometimes kids have to come with us. And I don't know that we should hide different parts of our lives from our kids.
Yeah, she's definitely joined me on quite a few Zoom calls, which she does not care for. She'll be okay for like the first 40 minutes of a Zoom call. And then she'll be just like, when is this done? And I'll be like,
that's also how we feel about Zoom calls.
But I can't wait till like APAP 2030 and she's just like in the booth and can tell the show, can like explain the shows to me. And, like,
she said
tell
she
me
was
what the
gonna
routing
work,
is.
that she was going to work at my agency one day. She was like, oh yeah, I'll work
legacy. I love it.
What a sweetheart.
I was very surprised.
So you're never going to believe this. But we have a time machine. We have nearly no other assets.
It's these microphones and the time machine.
We went all in on the time machine.
Yeah.
But I would love to go back with you to just starting out again at Holden and Arts, knowing what you're getting into, but still like, I don't know at that point if you really knew that you were like a co-owner in not too many years. What advice would you like to give that Sarah?
Just chill out. I think as in me, perhaps other agents can feel overly responsible for their tours and really feel like a failure if things don't come together the way you want them to. There's certainly like our effort plays a huge role in the tour's success, but we can also put in a huge effort and the tour cannot not make and not happen, or issues can come up. And actually a weird lesson that COVID forced us to learn was that there's a lot of things out of our control. So I really now try to have some perspective, treat things more like data and say like, okay, I was excited about the show for all these reasons. All that's true. it's not resonating with the venues for all these reasons. That's also true. Like what can we learn from and moving forward and not take it so personally. I think for the beginning of my career, I took things very personally. And in some ways that made me a great worker. And it made me very stressed because there could always be more money. There could always be a longer tour. If you keep moving the goalposts for success, you're just never going to get there.
All right. Well, Sarah, it's been so wonderful to talk to you. I mean, you're such an incredible agent and mother and writer and friend. And yeah, Katie said it best, all around kick-ass woman in this industry. So we look forward to seeing you again.
I would like to congratulate Sarah Saltwick on giving the best piece of advice to her former self that I believe I've heard on this podcast up till now, which is just chill out.
Mm.
And this touches right back onto the start of this episode. I just needed to chill out and be in the moment. And I wish I had that advice going in.
Well, yeah, and taking it a step further and like thinking about things that don't go well as data points instead of like highly personal would clarify so many choices.
Yeah, Sarah's comment about not taking things so personally also hit home. And that's I think a hard earned piece of wisdom. And I would say probably the five of us have experienced that as well. I was so glad to be a part of this conversation with Sarah. Danielle, thank you for inviting me. And again, there's so many wonderful nuggets and things that I learned about Sarah that I didn't know. For instance, I didn't know until the 2022 OAPN conference that Sarah was a playwright. And that creative journey and how that plays into her work as an agent, I think was fascinating. And I really enjoyed that part of our conversation.
I hope that I get an opportunity to see some of Sarah's work, specifically her show, The Girl Who Became Legend. One, I think the story sounds fascinating, but like, what a great fucking title. Like that, I love everything about it.
One of the things I liked when you guys were talking about her service and how she, was on the committee at APAP, she offered the suggestion of not just putting yourself out there for things that you're like an expert in or feel like you're really good at, but to actually sign up for something that you don't know enough about, that you want to learn more about. I thought that was really an interesting way to think about doing service. It's something I've never thought of in that way before, because I always think, I'm not going to sign up for this committee because I don't have much experience in that. But that's how you learn, by working with others who maybe are experts and practicing it and doing it in that way. You're giving back to the community and you're growing at the same time, which I think might make the experience more meaningful. So thank you, Sarah, for that.
The other thing I really appreciate about that is a really practical bit of information of her just saying, I'd like to be part of this. Like if you say that in enough rooms, that people will listen and invite you along for that. And I think that is a valuable piece of information, especially for people who are new to the industry or just, want to be involved more. Like voicing that will eventually lead you to that.
That is 100% true. As a leader of a state arts consortium, we are always looking for people to help with committees and all kinds of things. So if someone is willing to roll up their sleeves and join you, you're welcome. We want you.
Well, and also you put that out there and then you show up in spaces, right? And keep having those conversations. And if you're showing up and you're contributing, then people see that and they will take you seriously when you say, hey, I want to serve, or I want to be a part of this. But then her piece of advice about thinking about what you want to learn or what you're not an expert in, I think that piece is also really valuable, especially for emerging talent and those who are newer, because you're not going to be an expert in everything. But what an opportunity to learn and grow and surround yourself with people that can teach you along the way, whether that's actively teaching you or just through observing and through that process of osmosis, being in the same space with others. I know that has bared itself out in my career, and I think she's right on the money there. And I love that as well.
There was a moment in this interview that I really appreciated, that when Sarah was talking about how Holden and Arts selects their roster, she was very particular to not use the word quality. I love that she thought about that, because quality is such a tricky word, especially in the arts, because it often is used to gatekeep, and it's often used to really keep certain types of art out of venues and out of spaces. But it's such a tricky word, because sometimes like that's the best way to describe something. Like there is a quality about it that you're like, it's just really well done. And so it's hard to not use that word, but also like when you use that word, it muddies the water there.
I think as you were describing that, Kevin, you use the word the way we should use it is it has a quality rather than it is quality. And I think, we can put and attribute qualities to everything. And so I think instead of ranking art against itself as, oh, this is like a quality 10 and this is a quality 4, it's like, well, no, that's your personal persona. And like you said, you can use it for gatekeeping, but it doesn't mean there's no validity to that, but it's just the way we approach it. So I like the idea of you accidentally said it, but I think it works better is, what quality it has, not it is quality or it isn't quality.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you, Brian. Yeah.
Well, thank you. You're the one who said it.
I went right past it. So I appreciate you pointing that out.
Well, if that piece of art is effective in what it's trying to do, let's find the people that would give it a quality 10.
We've also talked many times in other episodes about this, but it's such an important topic about juggling all the many different things that we have in life, whether it's parenting and our jobs and blah, blah, blah. And I liked how Sarah talked about, comparing it to being trapped under a jar and, when she was trying to juggle everything, and particularly not being able to get to the writing, which is one of her biggest passions in these days since her daughter's been born. And I can feel that because I have that with my music and wanting to get to writing my guitar. And I just have too many things going on right now. The advice is always, oh, well, you make time for it. You could, if this is your passion, but sometimes you just can't. And the important thing, I think, is just to not ever let go of it and say, oh, I guess I'll never get back to it. It's to just constantly keep an eye on it for when the opportunity does present itself, when you can make the time to then do it, because that's when you have. And it's so hard sometimes.
I mean, just choose not to sleep for a few days and you'll get there.
Right. But Sarah's attitude too about, well, let's find things that my daughter and I both enjoy doing. And, like those are the things we're going to do. And, she's learned that she loves watercolors and they both love a little treat. But I was just thinking like, I have a feeling that that's going to change. Like once her daughter gets into school and like learns how to write, after she's like experienced Sarah really in those creative moments, being in the theater and being in the agency, and, really kind of seeing that side of the work and how much she loves to write, I mean, is going to have to wear off on her daughter. They're going to have so many great like little writing dates. I can't wait for it.
One thing that I really appreciate her bringing up and pointing out is irrational fears, completely irrational fears that we all have. Like, an entry door in the middle of the stage. I've had the exact same experience whenever I've had these dreams about these ridiculous things happening and the theater being rearranged in different ways, none of it making sense and trying to make sense out of it. And you can't get ahead of it. And it's all a culmination of our own anxieties. But just acknowledging that those anxieties are there and the majority of them are in irrational fears that will never come to a reality for any of us.
I was also really grateful in this interview that Sarah talked more in depth about what the transition looked like, the ownership between Michael and Teresa and to her, Sarah, and Spring. I feel like when we talk about leadership transitions in the field, a lot of times it's about presenting organizations or like larger multi-state agencies. There's a real value in understanding what that looks like for, I guess, like a smaller organization. And, just a group that's only got 2 or 3 people leading it. And I was just really grateful for her transparency and what that process looked like. And I'm sure that was really hard to think about doing and, to actually to get through and to pay it back and then to feel like it's yours. I think that's a story that we need to tell a little bit more. And how do we keep these agencies that are really wonderful around for 40 years?
I think it's also an incredible business model that they have established with the co-ownership model and the equal decision making and that sort of thing. And I think it's really interesting to think differently about how we organize our organizations, right? And what those leadership structures can be, whether they're vertical or horizontal. How layered are they? How are we sharing in decision making power? So I really, same Danielle, appreciated her being transparent and sharing that, because I think especially for people who are moving into leadership positions, it's good to hear about other models and take that for what it's worth and maybe apply some of those concepts to their own organizations and leadership styles in the future.
I didn't write down the exact quote. I just remembered the idea of it, but she suggests to bring your full self to the work that you do in everything that you do. And to me, I thought that was like the one biggest takeaway of the whole thing. If anybody's listening to anything, it's just like whatever you're doing, put your whole self in it. and I appreciated that as well.
Before we wrap, I actually wanted to tell one short little story and give Sarah a thank you. So I don't know that Sarah remembers this, but it was my first Arts Midwest conference in 2017. And I was pretty much by myself for the entirety of the conference. And I think it was the opening party in Columbus at the Art Museum. And I was standing in the drink line and Sarah was standing in front of me. And if you know Sarah at all, she's tall and gorgeous with this red hair and she's so dynamic. And she was chit-chatting with people as we were waiting in line. And she turned around and she noticed that I was standing there completely by myself, talking to no one, and no one was talking to me. And she did what we have talked about so many times on this podcast. So she just said, "Hi, how are you? I'm Sarah," introduced herself, and we ended up chatting. And then, of course, later on, I stopped by their booth, and it made me feel so not alone in that crazy setting that I had never experienced before. And it was a moment that I obviously have thought about a lot and appreciated so much. So Sarah, thank you for your kindness and thank you for being a person in our industry that does that outreach and makes people feel so comfortable and so welcome in the field. I think that comes a little bit from us being TYA people. But I think it's also just like a genuine part of Sarah's personality. So thank you. And we, so appreciated having you on the podcast this week.
Well, thanks so much, Katie, for saying, I think, a lot of the unsaid advice that we have on this podcast. And that's if you get to know somebody here and you enjoy listening to their interview, like reach out to them, see them at a conference and go up to them and talk to them. And I can't encourage enough for anybody who gets a chance to meet Sarah Saltwick to just get to know her a little bit more. She's been a wonderful colleague to me, and I know to Katie, and I think to the others on this podcast as well. And I'm grateful that she took the time out of her incredibly busy schedule as a co-host of APAP to talk to us there. And, I love her. We'll see you again later. Bye. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to There's No Business Like. Our producers and hosts are Brian Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Van Hook. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and are not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. Keep up with us at nobusinesslike.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and socials. If you like this podcast, give us a like, a follow, a review, or our favorite, a 5-star rating. Oh, wait, what was that site? I got it, don't worry. It is nobusinesslike.com. Do I sound out bus-I-ness every time I type it? Yep, sure do. Stay in touch, my friends. Hi, everybody. Oh, no, that was terrible. I don't want to hurt the people's ears.
For the time that I got so much shit for starting out really high.
You sounded fine.
Exactly. It wasn't nearly as high as what Danielle just did.
Hey. What was that?
Hey.
Who's coloring?
Oh, sorry. I'm fidgety. I'm very fidgety today. I was rubbing my pencil on my desk while I was thinking.
I was going to say wrap it up, but I just smacked my microphone.
I have one more thing, if that's okay.
Nope. I said wrap it up.